right, so you remember how last episode, well, now 2 episodes running, I didn't have an intro planned. I didn't like have anything really planned. And then remember last week that train wreck of an intro that we did about the new podcast microphone?
Yeah.
And remember how I was like, we just gotta get through it. We're gonna lose a lot of listeners or whatever, and we're just gonna get through that or whatever. It's interesting what happened, and maybe this is a sign that the more unprepared we are for this podcast, good things happen. So FDK, the ETC podcast, has a YouTube channel, and you know, I'm starting to think maybe we need to tell the YouTube channel more that, hey, everybody, there is an audio podcast as well.
Like the audience is bigger there than
yeah.
our
So
podcast.
here's the crazy thing. Okay, so again, as I mentioned last episode, there's a lot of, you know, we have a lot of videos, right? Like we have the main podcast video, which is the whole podcast in video form, and then we kind of chop it up into little clips, right? So we have a lot of videos, and the majority of those videos are pretty low viewership. Like we're talking again, like under 10 views maybe on a couple of those videos. Our very first episode had like 60 views, so that was pretty good, but nobody really watches much anymore. And then we had one video that we posted again when we started this season, so like 10 weeks ago, about the Apple Spatial Audio, and that has 180 views. So that's like our highest viewed video, something we posted 10 weeks ago. So this train wreck of an intro that we did last week, that was a clip that I cut up and I put it on YouTube, and in 1 week, it has over 250 views.
Nice.
It is our highest viewed video by far, and not only is it our highest viewed video, it's within 7 days it got that much viewership. And it's so funny because I got really self-conscious right away because people like the two like first kind of thumbs up or thumbs down I saw were just 2 thumbs down. Like people didn't like it, and I understand why, because it's this brand new microphone that came out and everybody's looking for good info, and we're just kind of ranting about it.
Right.
But then we got a couple thumbs up, a couple comments. People seem to like the video enough, so yeah, so, and this is kind of funny too, right? Because this kind of goes in line with what Andrea was asking last week about the YouTube search algorithm as well. The majority of those views came just from people searching the Shure MV7. So yeah,
Which is a very timely thing, I guess.
That's the one advantage we do have. We are timely. We're not informative, but we are timely. Yes. So anyways, I want to thank all the viewers and all the people who are listening out there and watching out there. So that's pretty cool. All right. Welcome to the ETC podcast, your one-stop pod for entertainment, technology, cars, and all things random. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Zdenker.
This is the grand we couldn't figure out the name of it, right? It's not a bicentennial. Half centenary episode. This
totally
is episode 50. Is that right? Is that an actual word that you looked up?
It is a word, but I think it refers to like 100 years, not just the number 50.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. So episode 50 for this wonderful November 4th, 2020. I was pretty amazed that we recorded 40 episodes in those first couple of years. You know, and now we hit episode 50, but now it's not so impressive because, as I mentioned before, like people like Joe Rogan and Mark Maron and all these people are in the thousands of episodes. So, but you know what? For a casual podcast between a couple of friends, like, you know, I'm pretty happy with episode. Like we've hit this milestone. Yeah. So,
same.
Yes. Okay. So we have a special episode today. It is not your typical ETC podcast. We might not have any time for any news. You know, we might be just jumping right into this. We are going to do a list episode. So this is something that we used to do in the past. And in the past, we used to spread this across 2 episodes. And so that was our double fat episodes. But this episode, we are going single fat.
Yes.
I was waiting for you to fill in that.
I was gonna ask what was the last episode we did? What was the last list that we did? Do you remember?
List episode? Good question. I don't know, because I do remember 2 topics that we did cover in the past. We have covered top 5 scary things. It was kind of in celebration of Halloween.
Yeah.
And in the past, we've also done. Remember, we did like Christmas gifts that were like under like $0 to $10, I think, or something like that.
okay.
Like 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60.
Totally do not
60
remember
to
that.
100.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're kind of like buying like a buyer's guide for ETC stuff. In that price range. So we did those. I want to say we've done more than just 2, but maybe not. Maybe not. I can't remember the last one that we did. So yeah, we are doing a list episode. It is going to be single fat, but the fatness to minute scale has changed. In the past, you know, it would be single fat would equal 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
This is going to be a single release, but that single fatness could go over an hour. Who knows?
Yeah.
Only time will tell. So the grand reveal of today.
Yes.
So if you didn't listen to last episode, today, man, I am dry. I'm going to drink some water. We are doing the top 5 technology things.
That's right.
That we have ever owned. And there were a couple of rules around this. So one, it had to be something that we were in possession of or that we owned. I maybe bent the rules a little bit in terms of like who purchased it. You know, like a lot of technology growing up, my parents bought for me. So not necessarily bought with your own money, but stuff that was yours.
Yeah.
The second rule was it had to be a specific thing. So, you know, if you had a general category of like MacBook or iPhones, or I mean, I don't want to be Apple favoritism here, but like or TVs or whatever.
This is just gonna be a whole episode of Apple devices we've owned, right?
Yeah, exactly. It had to be a specific model that you owned and that you enjoyed and that you liked or whatever. So those are the kind of the rules. And the term best is variable, you know? I mean, it's not variable. It's up to interpretation. And I'm curious to hear what Aaron's thoughts are when we get into the list. But that was it. The top 5 best technology things that we've owned. And I purposely also use the word like technology things because, you know, technology itself is a little bit...
I definitely started to... not that I necessarily followed the rules here, but definitely started to go a little astray until I remembered the item or thing part of the rules. So
now before we get into this, I'm curious, like how hard was this for you? Because I'll admit it was a little bit challenging for me, but at the same time, I didn't care that much about being fully accurate. Like I wasn't like, oh, if I don't get this list right, you know, people are going to hold me to this or whatever. But it was a little bit tough for me, like narrowing down what I want. Like, how hard was this for you?
Yeah, I had to try not to think about it too much because I think I started to, but I think eventually what I landed on was, and I think again, this is, I think like you said, the best part is difficult because how do you grade that? How do you rate it?
Yeah, exactly.
So I just, didn't try to think about it too much. And if anything, I just kind of chose more on things that, you know, really stuck in my mind and memory without trying to then evaluate and like score or
as
rank.
the why. Yeah. And that's kind of how, I mean, that's how I approached it the first time. And then I'll tell you this, my number one item, like, it didn't come out on my first draft as my number one item, but my second draft, I kind of had it as my number one item. And then as I thought more about it, I was really happy that I settled on that as my number one item because like the reasons and the justification became very clear to me, like why I'm happy with that. So, okay. So here's
I also do not have a 1 to 5 ranking. So I went a little bit differently. I have 5 things, but they're not like best to worst. They're 5 things, but I do have an ordering to it, which I'll explain.
So in traditional ETC form,
totally not on the same page.
We're not on the same page. Okay, so my list, Casey Lee's list, is from worst to best. Okay, I'm gonna do my 5th best, 4th best, and so on.
Yeah.
Aaron's list is. Are you gonna reveal it, or are you gonna explain it as we go?
No. So my method and I think this is more stemming from the fact that it was difficult for me to try to rank these. So I'm just going to go chronologically, which will be interesting. But so basically starting with the oldest thing on this list to the most recent.
All right, cool. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. We are going to go through item number 5, 4, and 3. We'll take a short break. when we come back from the break, I do have a little part for honorable mentions because I do think there was a lot of devices that like probably should be on this list and should be mentioned, but just didn't make the list. And then we'll finish off the episode with number 2 and number 1. Okay?
Nice.
All right. So let's start with number 5. Aaron, what is your number 5, I guess, chronological best technology item?
I'm actually trying. I have to make sure I get the dates here right. This is going back.
So you might not even be following your own rules here.
Okay, so I think I'm trying to think here. No, I think this is the oldest one on this list. So
okay, number 5.
Number 5 for me, a very specific thing, and I actually debated what the definition of technology was, but I'm just gonna say this and we'll see how it fits. It was something I got for Christmas as a kid, a Lego set, but it wasn't just any Lego set. It was the Lego, I don't know what the actual name is, but it was a space monorail set.
Yes.
And so this was a pretty significant set, like hundreds and hundreds of pieces. It had like it was a space theme thing, but the amazing thing about it was that it was a monorail and not just a static monorail. It actually had like a motor and a battery, and it would actually like move, and it was kind of automated in that when it got to one end of the track, it would reverse and then go back to the beginning of the track.
So cool. I 100% that qualifies as technology.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. No question. No question about that. I love that you had that on your list because I mean I didn't even think about that. I mean I didn't think about your list at all, but I love that you had that on your list because that is one of my earliest memories of you. Like when your family moved to Pembroke.
Yeah.
And we kind of met you guys, started to become friends with you guys. I remember coming to your basement and I don't know, you had your kind of computer set up. I think you actually had a science fair project kind of on the wall or something like down on the floor on the wall.
Yeah.
And you had this train set up, this Lego train set up. So really early memory. Yeah. That's all. Did you ask for it for Christmas or was it just a surprise from your parents?
I don't even remember. And so how much detail should we go into the reasoning behind these? Because
I really want to hear the reasoning because I think that's one of the fun of the discussion of this.
Yeah. So I think, thinking back, the thing that sticks in my memory. So obviously as a kid, this was awesome, right? Because, it's a huge Lego set and, what kid doesn't like to build Lego? And then bonus that it actually moved and things. So it being just an awesome Lego set, I think is a pretty key factor. But I do remember like the best thing about this set, and this was not the only Lego I had, but it basically became like a basis for any like Lego themed stories I would put together. So I would literally kind of like build other stuff like around it.
Oh,
and just
awesome.
like play out stories, like basically stories like, I don't know, around the space station or something.
Yeah.
But it was just like, again, it was a lot more than just the like building Lego itself. Like it got a lot of like use as a kid for me because I would then, make up other scenarios and kind of build stuff like around it. So it was kind of like the basis for building all sorts of cool stuff like around it.
Did you ever like start to really stretch like you got a pirate set one day and it's like, oh, the pirates have to ride a space monorail.
No, there was like all like, I don't know what stories I made up, but it was definitely like throw in like a tank or something, right? Or like throw in whatever. But that was like I got a ton of and not just myself, like I'd do this with friends and stuff too. So it was just an awesome like childhood memory.
But not to mention, I mean, it's got to be one of probably like I have to imagine as kids, like that was one of the most sought after Lego sets. Period. Like Lego is not cheap, right? And like they're kind of premium, higher end sets like that. I'm sure a lot of people wanted, right? So I don't think I knew anybody else who had that actually. So like. I mean, it was a big deal for me when I got it for sure. And like, again, I don't know how long, I was looking at it or wanting it. But I actually just recently got the box back from my parents' place actually. And I don't even know if I have all the pieces still, but I do want to put it back together someday.
if I have all the pieces. But yeah, it's still a pretty impressive Lego set.
That's awesome. Okay, number 5 on Aaron's list is the Lego Space Station Monorail set. I love that made your list. Great opening. All right, number 5 on my list. Now I have to preface this with a lot of my items on my list have like kind of like what you said. Like it's kind of has to do with the experience that you had with the item, right? It doesn't. The item itself might not have been necessarily a technological marvel, or it might have been, but it's all about kind of like that experience you had with it. And I have to admit, my number 5 item, like when I look back on it, I just remember it being the first time I experienced it. My mind was like completely blown away, and I have a very vivid memory of it actually. So what it was, it's actually a gift that I got my dad, and because it was something that needed setup, I kind of justified kind of opening it up and trying it out before I gave it to my dad for Christmas.
Classic.
And it was actually at the time that we were living together. So this was back when we were living on Lee's.
University.
And I had bought, my dad this gift. And so again, it's like, oh, it's Christmas, but you know what? I want to make sure it works before, because it's the first time I ever bought something like this. And I went and tried it out. And what I'm talking about is my very first GPS.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. So this was it was a Magellan GPS. So specifically in the car.
Name in forever.
Yeah, Magellan, and which I think is a pretty clever name, because wasn't Magellan like an Explorer or something like that? And so this was pre GPS being on your phone. This was still around the time of MapQuest and Google Maps or whatever. But and to be fair, again, I'm pretty sure this was way after GPSs were still a pretty regular thing for people like hikers and people there's like a lot of campers, and people would use like kind of these personal GPSs in the woods and stuff like that. I don't know a lot of people that had a GPS at the time in their car, and so this was at that time. And the experience that I'm speaking about was I literally I plugged this thing in my room in our apartment, and I was charging it, and it was like not getting a signal. And I was like, man, like hopefully this thing actually works or whatever. And again, you have to imagine like you've never played with GPS before, so you don't know what's going to happen, right? And then I took it in my car, and I very specifically remember the intersection. I drove to Metcalfe and Laurier in Ottawa. So you know that like Tim Hortons that's kind of around the Marriott that's near there? Yeah. And it got this, I was just sitting in my car, and it's like, oh man, like this thing's not working. Like what's happening here? And then the map changed, and it got its signal, and I was like, oh my God, like this thing knows exactly where I am.
Yeah.
And I was like so blown away by this. And, obviously GPS has become such a regular thing nowadays, but that first experience of experiencing something like first of all, that's crazy, because it's like, it knows exactly where you are, and it's like, based on technology that I definitely did not understand at the time. I kind of understand a little bit more. But also the surprise of it being like this free service,
Right,
it's just
you
like
buy the device and it somehow works. Yeah,
exactly. And then all of a sudden you just have like this thing, like, so so the Magellan GPS, I don't remember the model number. I can picture it in my head what it looks like. I can probably look it up and post in the show notes. But and even afterwards, like, I mean, again, my dad definitely used it. I used it, it was great. But it was just that first experience of that signal and the map locating where I was just like blown away. So number 5 on my list is GPS.
Yeah.
Number 4.
All right. So chronologically again. And what's funny? You mentioned your memory of coming over and seeing that, like playing with that Lego set. And then you mentioned a computer. So
yes.
So I'm actually not sure chronologically. This might have actually should have been first, but the next on my list is the first computer, at least that I remember using and having in our house. And I actually think it was a computer my dad bought for his, like when he was finishing like university. Like it was basically, it wasn't a computer for me. It was just like for typing up documents and reports and stuff like that.
That's so crazy to think about your dad finishing university. It's just like we
Yeah,
are already
this
so
was,
past
this was when
undergrad.
he was teaching, so it was
Okay.
like not when he was younger when
Right.
when he already had like I was maybe 10 or something, 10 or 11. But yeah, very first computer, I couldn't even tell you what the name of it is. Like I think it was some sort of 286. So if you're familiar with like the x86 kind of computers, I think 286 is a pretty early generation. But yeah, my dad had this computer, and all it did was just run DOS pretty much. It had a like 10 megabyte hard drive, 20 megabyte hard drive,
That's
which is
so
huge
crazy.
apparently. And not only the 3.5 inch floppy disks, which I don't even know if everyone listening to this even knows what that is, but it also had the larger size floppy disk. I forget what
The B drive.
yeah. So I don't know what the H is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 5.5. And
5.5, yeah.
So me and my friends in high school, well, I tried to convince people to use this term that anything that was really old was very B drive.
Yeah. Did that pick up? Did
No.
people say-
Like so many of my failed attempts.
Yeah.
I'm surprised FTK is getting the traction that it's getting among
Yeah.
us. So.
So there's 286. Obviously compared to today, it didn't do a lot. But yeah, it was. I mean, to me at the time, it was amazing, and that was my first real experience, just really sitting in front of a computer,
Wow.
playing around with it. But it was also a great experience because you really had to, almost hack it to do anything. So out of the box, there's very few things you could do. I remember there's a few games you could play on it, and you would just load them from these floppy disks. But you had to enter in all these like weird command prompt commands to basically, open up memory and even play these games. So that itself was almost a pre-game because you didn't know if it would work, right? You get this game and you're like, okay, like I don't even know if this is gonna work, but let's see. And so that initial part was exciting just because you're trying to do all these like memory like commands and things like that. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. And when it does work, you're like, oh my God, like this actually works now, right? And like 8-bit graphics. I don't even remember there was a sound card on there. If there was, it was just like super basic. So like my first real kind of foray into kind of like any sort of basic computer, like I guess you could even call it programming. It had, word, like I forget what the word processor was on it. Like it ran on DOS, so I forget what the name was. But it also had QBasic or Basic or something like that. And so that was also my first experience, just like mostly because I was bored, as a bored kid and just like trying to play around with this computer. I do remember one time, I think something happened where trying to get a game to work, like I wiped like the hard drive.
The hard drive?
And again, this is like the computer
Oh
my
my
dad
God.
is using for his like university thesis. And, like,
Oh my God.
so luckily he had like backups on floppy disks.
Yeah.
But I remember trying to get a game to work and just deleting all his like, actual like real work stuff. So yeah, that was, I think again, like, compared to today's technology, did not do a lot. But yeah, just like learned a lot on that. Had a lot of fun. Just like killed hours and hours, just trying to play around with that and hack away at that. So it's number 4 on my list. Although I think what happened is I think that computer was actually purchased maybe before the Lego set.
Okay.
But I don't. My memories like about actually using it come after.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because like I'm trying to think. Our first x86, I think that I remember. I want to say it was a 486, and before that, my dad had a couple Apples, but I can't remember like the Apple II or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, I don't really remember interacting with that. So yeah, it was kind of x86 era that I remember really interacting with it, and like it is crazy thinking about like I don't know like did you like were you kind of just tinkering around or did you use it like because you had to use it for productivity reasons or like
honestly I think there must have been some day like I mean I think I would kind of play around with it, but I think there was probably one day where myself or someone or maybe even my dad probably just like came home with some games on a floppy disk or something.
yeah
Right, like a game, like, and I think that was just like, oh, these things can do that, and
Yeah.
like this is interesting. So it was probably something like that really triggered it. But yeah, it just being around, I think, naturally that, I would probably just like play around with it a bit. But I think, yeah, it must have been some game that came along, and that was like, okay, I want to play around with this some more and do more things on this.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually don't have any computer on my list, but it's weird that I don't. Like it really, I mean, it's such a massively influential piece of our lives.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't have.
But
a single
again, I'm
computer on my
not like
list.
I think again, based off our criteria here, which I don't really know what it is. Maybe this seems to be like it's trending more towards like first experiences or something.
Yeah, and kind of
Right.
nostalgia, right? And like,
Early formative things, because
Yes,
if
exactly.
we're gonna go on any criteria, I would have chosen a much like newer computers. Like I mean, arguably,
Yes.
like I've gotten a lot out of utility out of like a new MacBook than
Yeah.
that first computer. But I think there's something to be said about those early experiences and what you learn from it. And
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think the influence that it has, like the influence and the impact, kind of has on your life, right? I think that was kind of one of the things I was kind of thinking about a little bit. So, all right, number 4 for me, actually changed like very last minute. Actually, last night, because I was using the device last night,
Okay. Yeah.
and I was like, this has to be on the list. Like this device is too good,
Yeah.
not to be on, not to not be on the list. And so, in my opinion, this device is like, if you want to talk pure, like obviously, I mean, you talk about, that device was great for its time. So obviously, the most advanced, best device has to be kind of something that's now. And so, for that reason, obviously, it's the best device I've ever owned. But I think it really like speaks to how, like, when you use it, it's like, oh my God, this thing is like so ridiculously incredible. Like that, it's one of those devices that when you use, like, you're still impressed by it, even though you own it and you've been using it like for months.
Okay.
Right. It's like every time you use it, like, oh my God, how good is this device? Right.
Yeah.
Like you almost don't become numb to how good it is.
Yeah.
And to me, it's, in my opinion, almost like the culmination of so many technologies and so many things that technology companies have been kind of building towards. And obviously, this list was going to include at least 1 or 2 or 5 Apple devices. So I'm talking about an Apple device. And when I talk about Apple specifically, I think it's something that they've been trying to get to for so long. And I don't think it's necessarily the original vision. I think they've listened to their customer feedback and tweaked it. I think this is actually very far off Steve Jobs' vision for this device. But I'm talking about my current iteration of the iPad Pro. So...
Right. Yep.
So I'm 2 generations back now, or 1 generation back. So it's the first iPad Pro that had these squared off edges and things like that.
Yeah.
But as I was using it yesterday, I was just like the screen itself is just like so ridiculous. And again, every time I look at the screen, I'm like, this is insane. It's insane how thin and light this thing is. It's so powerful. It has so much stuff going on in it. And it's executed so gorgeously, and it's such a nice industrial design, right? Like all those things, it's just like, it's obviously so easy to pick, again, the latest and greatest device, but I feel like it just deserves mention in particular because I can't think of any other Apple device that I've thought was just so gorgeous every time I picked up. Like, don't get me wrong, other devices that I use have been way more influential, way more impactful. I use way more than the iPad Pro. But just as a gorgeous technical marvel, I thought the iPad Pro deserved to be on it. And I will mention what I took off the list as a result of this. But again, after using it yesterday, I was just like, it's got to be on there. It's got to be on there. So
you're not going to mention the.
I'll mention it. Sorry, I'll mention it in the honorable mentions.
Okay.
When we get to that.
So okay, yeah, I'm gonna hold off because I do have something to say about the iPad Pro, but I think I agree. I think it's what you said about just there's some aspect of it that is not just about what is on, like what you see on paper or what kind of like you know what people think it can do, right? Which is
Yeah.
I think the problem is there. It's like it's a very powerful device. You can, for a lot of people, I think this could be the only kind of computing device they need, right?
Yeah.
And I think it does that really well. But there's something to be said about really what I think has been true about the iPad from the beginning, which is it's a very, like, some people call it luxury. Another way you can kind of like look at it is something you don't really need, because you could, you know, if you have a laptop and a phone, you don't really need this, right? And actually,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I don't know what the stat is, but I would hazard to guess that most people that have any sort of iPad probably also have like a phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And very likely also have a computer. But there's something to be said about just, you know, like, you don't need to do it, but it's almost the things you don't need to do an iPad is really great for, right? Just you're sitting down, you're wanting to read something. It's just enjoyable in some way to use, you know, that you don't get out of looking at like a small screen, that you don't get out of, you know, looking at a computer or something.
It's one of those devices. It's one of those devices that you wish you had more to do on it, like because it's so nice and so gorgeous. Like, you wish your interaction with it wasn't kind of 10 to 15 minutes of browsing the internet. You know, you kind of wish that you were always on that device, right? And it's just because, but for the other reasons, just because it like looks so nice, and it's like the design is so nice, and every interaction you have with it, like just feels so nice, right? That you wish that every device kind of gave you that joy, right? Like, everything else, you kind of get, again, desensitized to it. Like, you start, like, there are a lot of times when I'm using my MacBook Pro and I forget like how nice this is. It's a very nice device. Same with my iPhone. I just forget how gorgeous it is, right? I love devices where you like take a second, you're like I love like that screen, how it's like how close it is to the glass. Like, even just that little detail, it's mind blowing. Like, I look at this like, I can't believe this is a screen, you know? So so that is my number 4
great
device. Number 3.
Number 3. All right. So, again, this is because these are old, like, I have to go back into my memories of when I was younger. I'm not exactly sure what the brand was, but do you remember CD burners?
Oh yeah. Wow. That's a great choice. That's such a good choice. CD burners. Yes.
So I think,
you're talking literally like in your computer though, right? Like,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
You know, I think I had a Sony one at some point, and I don't know, an LG one, but I don't think it matters. It doesn't really matter which specific one. Probably one of the first ones, but that, you know, when so this is, again, fast forward a few years from, you know, the 286 days. So this is now in the age where we have high speed internet just starting, like, people to get it. You know, you have much more access to things in terms of like music, videos, whatever. But yeah, that first CD burner that I got, I just remember, like, it's so funny how, you know, like, it seems like so silly to have this single device, but I actually got a ton out of it. And so, like,
oh man, yeah,
there's a few things I remember. So I mean, obviously, so maybe I should explain, because maybe I'm taking for granted, like, if people actually know what a CD burner is.
But I feel like the majority of the people who listen to us,
hopefully,
like, are around our age, if not older. So
but basically, and I feel like no one does this anymore, but you know, CD-ROMs, which is, you know, a media, like, optical disc format, I guess. You don't see it as much today, but you could, at one point in time, buy blank CDs, and then you could have this drive in your computer that I think that is kind of like nicknamed CD burner, but it's just a CD-ROM writer or something. And you could basically put whatever data you wanted on these CDs, right? But I just remember, like, so obviously I don't know what the first use case was, but very quickly I did so much with this thing. So obviously, you know, like, just putting stuff, data on CDs, you know, backing up and stuff. I think that was like one thing, but I actually started using it a lot more for just music, right? So this was back in the days
big thing,
where you know, you could borrow music from you know, friends you didn't meet on the internet and download on that computer. But it wasn't like, I think initially you could actually make a CD that you could listen to, which was
Yeah.
kind of mind blowing that you could, you put your music on and then, you go in on your, CD Walkman, which maybe deserves another honorable mention.
Yeah.
And your Discman and listen to it. And it was just mind blowing, right? Because now suddenly you have access almost seemingly to any music and you can just put it on there. You could even make your own. Right, which was like what I did a lot of. I just made your own mix CD or something, right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome because like, hey, like I don't have to listen to just one album. I can put on like 20 songs on here from whatever different albums.
Like not to mention like the idea that you were making a CD, which is what the big music industry buffs were doing.
Yeah.
Right. It's like putting like a tool in your hand to actually, from a creative standpoint, make something that's as professional as what again the professionals are making.
Yeah.
Right. Like I find it's less these days where you're like, oh, I'm doing something as good as the professionals are doing.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Like they're giving you a tool that you can literally make your own professional like media. Right.
Yeah, and not just for music, right? I remember, making like copies of CDs for like software and stuff like that you could use. And then when the advent of MP3s really came along, now it took that up another level because you're like, okay, I don't just have to put 20 songs on here. I can put 600 songs, right? And that kind of was just mind blowing at the time, right? It's like, wow, on this one disc. I mean, I feel like this is the same reasons why, when the first iPod came out, right? People's minds were just blown because you could fit so much music on a single thing. And this is just like one disc. And even at the time, like we're talking like maybe $1 or $2 a disc, right?
Yeah.
So for $1 or $2, you fit so much on there. And so like, it was just, as a, in that time, like all the creative ways you could maybe like, borrow music from all your friends and put everything on one CD and make a really cool, like, collection of music. That was amazing. The other reason why this like stands out so much in my memory is technically like a CD burner enabled me to start my own like my very first business, I guess if you could call it that, which was basically in high school. I had this little business, a very underground business where basically I think I was charging $5 or $10 per CD. I something around that, and basically, I would sell a CD, and people could tell me anything they want to download and put on that CD. And so, a little caveat here was I was one of the first kids at my school with high-speed internet.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people were still on dial-up, and so CD fits like what 600-700 megabytes or something. That would take a long time on dial-up. That's pretty much impossible on dial-up. But on high-speed internet, you could download 600 megabytes overnight or something. But that was my very first business, which was basically I started with my friends, right? I'd just be like, hey, like, do you want? I'll download whatever you want, for $5, right? And I'll put it on CD. And next day at school, I'll come with the CD. And then that kind of spread because I was like, oh, like you can do that? All right, cool. Like, I want this downloaded. Here's $10, whatever they wanted from the internet. So that was my very first business. And it was just like all from that CD burner. Like I learned all
awesome.
from that. So that like I'll never forget that. And that's my number 3 pick.
That's such a good pick because I totally forgot, like, again, how much a part of my life that was. Like even just you're bringing back so many memories of like, CDR versus CDRW, like the dual layer versus the single layer. And then do you remember when like these burners, like HP and a couple of other companies released these burners where you could flip the disc upside down and it would burn like the label?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had one of those and I tried it. And it was so ridiculous because it took like, I like, this might be an exaggeration, but it felt like hours, like to just get the most basic design on it. It took so long.
Yeah.
And then I remember buying like remember when CDRs got so cheap and you would just buy like these barrels of like CDRs. Yeah, like for $25 you'd buy so many. And then just making all these like with DVD burners after that. Like I mean, I mean, one thing that is definitely missing from my list is a lot of productivity technology that let me express my creativity. And one of the big things is like when I would make movies and I burn DVDs and stuff like that and hand those out or whatever, right? So
Totally,
that's an awesome pick. So number 3, CD burners. Okay, my number 3 is in the video game space. So video games were something that were a really big part of my life for a long time, and definitely faded in university. As I went to university, my love for video games definitely dropped. But kind of like growing up, up until university, I was like super into video games, and got to endlessly thank my parents for buying me so many video games, so many video game systems. I was definitely one of those really lucky kids who I didn't have to choose between Sega and Nintendo. I had both, these kind of things. So I was very lucky kid that way. And so obviously there's a ton of amazing game systems that came out in our time. But there are a lot of things there's a lot of them that I didn't have. I didn't own a PlayStation. I didn't own I didn't own a PlayStation, didn't own a 3DO, didn't own a Neo Geo, some of these kind of obscure systems, but I did own, the main systems. And, we always talk about Dreamcast as being an amazing system and probably one of your favorite systems of all time.
Yeah,
one of mine too. But my absolute favorite system of all time, again, because of the experience that I had with it, and my number 3 pick is the Super Nintendo. So the Super Nintendo, to me was the first system that kind of came into play that kind of took, like, people started to take video games a bit more seriously. Like when the Nintendo came out, obviously a lot of people had it. But the Super Nintendo, I remember like the commercials come, and this might have been just the time that I was kind of paying more attention to them as I was growing up or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I remember like the commercials that came out, and it was like 65,000 colors, and all this stuff. And all the advertisement. And so I got really excited about it. But what really made it exciting, and I kind of have like, I kind of have like fond memories with my dad about this. And like I don't know any other system that did this, but when the Super Nintendo was being released, they actually gave rental units out to like rental outlets, like movie rental places and video game rental places. Yeah, so you could kind of rent this thing before it ever launched.
Like Blockbuster. Right?
Yeah. So I rented this place in Pembroke called Basement Video. Yeah. And it was like, it came in almost like a Pelican case with the Super Nintendo. And I remember like again, thanks to my dad, like we would rent this thing pretty regularly. Like, like maybe every couple weekends we would just rent this thing with a couple games, or maybe, I can't even remember if there was a couple games out at that time. I really can't remember. Yeah. But I remember opening this thing up every time and taking it out of the foam and hooking it up and playing it. And then I remember when I got it for Christmas when it came out, it was crazy. Me and my family friends, we had family friends named the Lees as well, and we like played Super Mario World, like, and we finished it in like a couple of days. And then slowly, this was a system that I had in my bedroom, and we would I'd buy so many games for it, and I have so many fond memories of it, and it just like that launch was such a big deal, and it was like. It was the system that really, really got me into video games. Yeah. And, it was like, like Super Bomberman, NBA Jam, Super Mario World, Super Street Fighter, like all these really, really cool games that came out for it. So that is my number 3 pick, the Super Nintendo.
That's solid. Yeah, but you're so right about, that was really kind of, I think, the point, like in the history of video games where things really started to turn, right? I feel like, prior to Genesis, SNES, it was still very much a niche thing, right? I think even, like the original Nintendo, it seems like from my memory and looking back, like a very novelty kind of thing, right? Yeah. It's like you got it because it was like almost a novelty, not because, you're serious and playing games or something, right? And so, yeah, you're so right about the Super Nintendo being that almost like turning point, right?
Yeah.
Where
and I feel like the world,
that whole like console era.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the world started to take video games more seriously and the amount of money it could make and all this stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, we are going to take a short break, but we'll be right back after this. And we are back on this episode 50 extravaganza, counting down the top 5 technology items between me and Aaron. Before we move on with the list, though, we're going to check in with our fans. So we posted a tweet last week asking people themselves what are their top devices. And we actually got some response. So I'm going to bring that up right now. So our good friend Dave, he said, actually, I'll start with Brody because Brody responded first. So Brody said, growing up, this was king. And he posted a picture of the original Nintendo Game Boy. So nice, definitely, awesome device. Like crazy seller. Again, so many people had this thing. Just such a ubiquitous device. So thanks for posting that, Brody. And then Dave posts, I worry how this is going to go. But the original iPod was my favorite. Be gentle. So obviously Dave being a pretty big anti-Apple supporter. I don't know, anti-Apple supporter, anti-Apple or Apple protester, anti-Apple supporter. Yes. And this is what I want to bring up. So the number 4 item I said was my iPad Pro, right?
Yeah.
The thing that got kicked off the list was my iPod Nano, actually.
Nano.
Yes, that was my favorite iPod that I ever owned. The very first Nano, so the very thin stick, like vertical one.
Yeah.
And actually, Dave had one as well. So I wonder if he's talking about that iPod, but maybe he's thinking about the very, very first iPod. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the one that got kicked off. But yes, iPod definitely an awesome device. Yeah. So thanks, Dave and Brody, for contributing to our favorite devices. I think those are both good picks. And we have a voice message. So let me fire that up. This is from one of our regular listeners.
Hey guys, I just wanted to wish you congratulations on your 50th episode. That's so exciting. Yay. And I thought it'd be fun to leave you a voice message. I didn't realize I only have a minute, so I'm kind of going to try and spew off as fast as I can my top 5 technologies. Number 1, my phone, because it hasn't broken in 4 years, which is pretty amazing. Also, the Apple phone has the reminder app, which I love to use for grocery lists. Number 2, Bluetooth. Is that like saying internet? I don't know, but I do like my Bluetooth. It works in the car, and I like my Bluetooth speaker. It's some Sony one with extra bass. Pretty awesome, and it's waterproof. Number 3, my Apple TV, a very, very, very old version, probably the first version of Apple TV, which was a gift. Thank you. Number 4, Pinterest app. It's been a paramount in my washroom reno design and all things educational. Number 5, the Every Dollar budgeting app, which is also amazing. And Google Drive. I did it all.
All right.
That's all.
Big thanks, Andy. That's impressive. I learned something. I didn't know.
We also like the fact that there's 5 because I'm pretty sure we just asked people for just one, right?
Yeah, just for one. Yeah, exactly.
Like 5 is impressive.
Very impressive. I didn't catch what was our 4th one in our bathroom? What was that?
There's a budgeting app.
Oh no, right before that. What was that?
The Bluetooth,
whatever.
like speaker.
I don't know. There's something. We'll have to re-listen.
Those are all, and yes, those are all technologies.
Yes.
Yeah.
All very good ones. Big thanks, Andrea, for sending that in. You've always been a very good supporter of a big supporter of our podcast, and we really appreciate it, and we appreciate you sending in your voice message and again educating us. I didn't know this, that I guess voice messages have a limit of 1 minute. I did not know that.
I also did not know. Is that specific to like on our site?
Yeah, on Anchor.
Message is only 1 minute.
Yeah,
interesting.
There's like there's a kind of
I kind
voice
of like
message.
that. That's like, it makes it very short and brief. It is a message, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that way we know we can plan around that 1 minute or whatever. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, be sure to email us at the what is our email address? podcast.etc@gmail.com. And you can leave your own voice message at anchor.fm/the-etc-podcast. Big thanks to Brody, Dave, and Andrea for submitting this. We usually would spend a lot more time going through your guys' messages, but we have many more things to...
Those are all good technologies.
Yes. I definitely agree with all those. None of those I would actually disagree with. Although I did forget what was that one that she said on the.
I use a Pinterest app.
Oh, the Pinch. Okay, Pinterest. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. All right. Number 2, Aaron. What is your number 2 pick?
Yes.
For your technology item. Oh wait, sorry. Hold on.
Yeah.
We didn't do our honorable mentions.
Are we doing that now?
Yeah, I was going to do it
okay.
before we did the top two. Okay, so do you want to do yours first, or I'll do mine? Up to you.
I can. So all of them, like how, like I just
It's kind of a quick section of
Okay.
honorable mentions.
So first one actually on the line of Andrea's is does Bluetooth count? I was just gonna say high speed internet, and then I was like, that's not really an item, but I mean, I feel again, like for those that didn't go through that transition, you'll never understand how mind blowing of a shift that was to go from dial up internet
my God.
to high speed. So that's honorable mention, mostly because that's not it's not an item. It's just like I just wanted to mention that.
Good pick.
Nest thermostat or smart thermostats. Again, just very few things that have done something so well consistently. And again, it's one of those things just like you can't even compare it to what like how it was solved before, right? You know, like a on the wall manual thermostat. It's not even comparable. So definitely thought about that. I actually had iPad Pro on my list. I was like waffling, so agreed with your choice. AirPods, just like especially again,
I agree
feel
with you on that one.
same thing as the high speed internet. Like I don't know about you, how many pairs of Bluetooth headphones you've had in your life.
Oh yeah,
But like for me, it must be at least 6, and they always like only worked half as what they promise. So AirPods just by virtue of hey, these actually work. Like this is what Bluetooth or wireless headphones should have always been.
Totally agree with you on that one.
And last thing I had. So I didn't mention iPhones, even though like I do love them. But I don't even remember the name. I know who made it. So my very first smartphone was a phone made by O2, which is like a UK like phone company.
Yeah, carrier. Yeah.
But I just remember having this, and to me it was amazing because one, it had like a full color screen.
Yeah.
It ran Windows Mobile or something weird like that, and you could put like data on it, right? There's a SIM card, and so it was like a terrible phone. But it was my first experience in having data on a phone, being internet connected, having this nice screen. It even had some simple games on it, like apps. But yeah, that was again not because it was a great phone. Just that was the first experience with what that type of device could be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Definitely agree with you on the AirPods. I also like how you mentioned it's just this like life of kind of you buy so many headphones and so many
very mediocre.
Yeah, and they finally solve it, right? There's some problem with them or some issue, right? And then you get the AirPods and they're pretty much 98% of what you want, right? So it's definitely agree with that. And I mean, you're right. You gotta mention the internet, right? It's definitely a winner. A couple of honorable mentions on my side. One massive category that I said that it's missing from my list, and I really do not want to. I definitely don't want to dismiss it. Yeah. Is just all the things that have allowed me to be a creative, right? Because obviously, I had a job in video production. I've done video production, a lot in my life for fun, and a lot of that stuff. And not to mention music is a big part of my life. And a lot of the stuff that allows me to create music and create film and stuff like that, I didn't have in my list. I just didn't really think about it. But those are actually really major pieces of technology in my life that have done a lot for me. So everything from like the Canon GL2 that my parents got me for graduation, to some of the Blackmagic cameras that I've had, to some of the recording equipment that I have, to some of the live streaming stuff that I'm doing nowadays. It's just like all that stuff that allows me to create is a massive category that's missing from my list. That is super important in my life and still very important in my life today. So there's that. My very first Mac laptop that I ever owned, the 17-inch PowerBook G4.
I remember that thing.
Just like I remember going to your first year residence, bringing it over and finding Nemo on it and stuff like that. And like having my first Mac was a really big deal. Like I said, the iPods were a really big deal. And actually, something recently that I bought that I think is actually a really nice solution is my NAS. My network attached storage, that becoming a home device to kind of finally solve my issue of buying hard drive after hard drive after hard drive, and just having just this expandable solution, I think is really worth a mention as well. So those are all honorable mentions. But we will definitely definitely hard to make this list of top 5, but it's weird. It's almost like I'm forgetting people. But I think the reason I feel bad a little bit is that these are things that, again, either have been big parts of my life that involve other people as well. Whether that's something that they bought me or something that I used, with other people, creating music with people and making films with people, right? This kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, totally.
All right, number 2 on Aaron's list.
So number 2, fast forwarding in time again a little bit. I feel that no list here would be complete, at least for me, and especially for this podcast, without something car related. And this next one, number 2 on my list, is actually my very first car.
Oh, nice.
So what that car was I think it was either a 1989 or a 1990 Mazda RX-7, and I think you probably remember this car.
Well, I'm surprised you don't know the year. I mean, you spent so much time with that car.
I think it was either an 89 or 90. And the reason I don't know the exact year is because, a lot of times cars, they're not made in that year, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely made in 89, but it might have been a 1990 model year. But obviously I did not buy this car new, so I don't actually know. But yeah, so this was, I think I was 18, 19, something like that. First car that I owned, and I was already pretty into and interested in cars even at that point. So saved up money from a bunch of summer job stuff. First car that I bought was barely working. It was also a manual transmission, which I'd never driven ever before. So I remember buying the car and then trying to just get it home. Right.
That's so funny.
And yeah, it was, again, I'm calling it technology, but I think, it's easy for people to forget how incredible and take for granted, a vehicle is, right? The fact that you get in, turn a key and you go anywhere. But I don't know. I think, again, this is, I mean, by no stretch, the best car I ever owned. Again, it was barely working. I literally spent a good year after I bought it just replacing everything because, a lot of stuff was just not really working well or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that taught me a lot of things just in terms of getting really into and understanding how to even work on a car.
Yeah.
My first taste is just I think, especially early on, right, the first vehicle that's really yours, the kind of freedom that comes from it, right? The freedom and ownership and just, whether it's being able to just drive wherever you want. And I did some pretty big trips in that car. I remember driving from Pembroke, right, to Niagara Falls in that car.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty long drive. I think that was at least eight hours or something, right? Drive.
Yeah.
And so again, that sense of I can go places. I can go travel places and drive places. Was pretty incredible. But then it was my first kind of just, understanding the mechanics of how cars work. And, even though, it was fairly more or less basic vehicle, there's still a lot of really interesting things, right? And I know you and I are a big fan of, there's this YouTube channel, I think called Engineering Explained.
Yes.
Where he just describes how transmissions work and just things that everyone just takes for granted, that these things all just work. But if you actually look into how these things are built and designed, it's kind of mind blowing, right?
I still to this day, I definitely don't understand it, to the level that you do, especially because you've hands-on done stuff with it. But the more I learn about how, a traditional kind of internal combustion based car works, I am so blown away that what is happening physically in the engine and the transmission and the brakes and the wheels and all that stuff, how that translates to such a seamless experience to the user, right?
Yeah.
the fact that, like you said, like you turn a key, you press a pedal, and you steer.
Yeah.
It's insane that it works as well as it does.
Yeah,
right?
for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles, right? You're driving a car,
Yeah.
and all just kind of more or less just works behind the scenes. But yeah, so that's number two, and I think like the last thing I'll say of why it's such an important thing for me, that first vehicle is it also kind of taught me, and this is why I think one of the reasons I'm my interest in cars. But I think this extends to other technology. It was one of the first times I realized that technology, engineering, things like that can be applied for things other than just function, right? Because that car was like, again, it was this really quirky 2-door sports car, right? Not very functional, not a ton of utility, but it was my first time just like seeing like, oh, you know what, like things can be engineered and built for fun, right?
Yeah.
Or style or whatever, right? Which was really cool. And I think that really kind of started off my interest in cars, but then also how I really kind of look at things, right? Like things can be built in a very impressive way, not just to, get from point A to point B in this case, right? But because they just want it to be fun, right? They want it to be interesting. And again, I think going back to some of the technologies I really love, like, I mean, like something like the iPad Pro, it's weird to make this analogy, but in a lot of ways, it's you don't use it just because of the functional aspect, right? A lot of the enjoyment you get out of it is because it's just enjoyable to use. It's just fun, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
I think I've told you this story before, but when I was in high school, I want to say I was not interested. Like I subscribed to the idea of doing things past utility, and I subscribed to the idea of like doing things for passion and love and joy and all this stuff like that. And I remember, at the time, still to this day, a lifelong aspiration of mine is the 911 Turbo, right? And I remember that there was a Porsche commercial that came out at that time that so perfectly captured that sentiment.
Yeah.
And I remember I either intended to do it or I actually did it. But I remember, I think, like typing out the words of this commercial and sticking it up on my locker. And you might have seen this commercial, or I might have sent it to you, or you might have come across it yourself. But the whole commercial was about like, what if we only did things for practical reasons? Like the whole commercial is like, what if we only built this? What if we only did this? Da 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 da.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, it's just a car commercial. At the end, it's like introducing the 911 Turbo or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's totally it. It's like technology for more than the sake of utility is a thing, and like. I love your love. Like I finally started to get it. Like when we did that kind of short film about your Datsun, I finally started to understand the love of tinkering and tweaking cars. Cause I mean, I do that with so many other things in my life where it's like, I buy a piece, like, I'll buy all this kind of music gear and like want to get the ultimate audio setup or whatever. Right. Or home theater and things like that. And I totally get that. Like you open my eyes to that where it's like, yeah, I wouldn't love, but I can totally understand like buying a used car and tweaking and tinkering it to the point where it's like, it's sweet. It's like, it's like you've really made it work, right?
I think that the thing that like I always have in mind, which like just to a lot of people is just insane, but the way I would put it is when something breaks on like my old Datsun, like I actually get really happy because it's like I think anytime you're doing it for like tinkering or passion, then it's like, oh, that's an opportunity to like make something better, right?
Yeah.
It's like, whereas if it's just utility, you're not happy because if something breaks, you're just like, oh, like, now I can't do something, right? Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Like whether it's like art or, like I feel like even like, I don't know about you, but sometimes like when I played guitar a lot, I would break a like guitar string. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to try a new set of strings now. Like, right? So yeah, it's a weird thing, but yeah.
I didn't experience that joy, but I kind of get it. I kind of get it. And also not to mention that, we were able to use your Mazda RX-7 in one of the most famous episodes of Pembroke Vice.
Yeah.
The episode was named after your car. It was episode 3, the Mazda RX-7. So, yeah,
classic.
very, very cool choice. Number 2, the Mazda RX-7. Okay, my number 2 is the obvious choice. this might end up being your number one, or you may have just kind of decided to leave it off your list. But you can't, like, at least for me, you can't have a technology list without mentioning a smartphone. And really, for me, it's the iPhone, obviously. And I mean, the iPhone, I mean, there's just so many obvious reasons why a smartphone is there. It's changed. Like you said, like going from non-high speed to high speed. The first experience I had with the GPS, I remember my first interaction with an iPhone. My classmate, who was this mysterious guy, so I went to film school in Vancouver, and all these people from all around the world. And there's this one guy, and I've told you about this guy before, but he's this mysterious guy from China who we didn't know what his deal was. Like, he was kind of weird, kind of quiet, but then apparently also super rich, because he would just take weekend trips, like to go see a soccer game in England and stuff like that. He would just like fly all around the world.
He clearly owns the iPhone factory or something. That's exactly where the story's going, right?
And so this is back in the days where, again, the very first iPhone was only released in the States, and he got one, and bought it, didn't care how expensive it was. And I remember I was with my buddy, and we were over at the Sound campus of the Vancouver Film School. I think it was Sound campus. For some reason, we're off campus. And this guy comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, Casey, you want to see something?" I'm like, "Sure." And he pulls out the iPhone. I'm like, "What the F?"
Yeah.
And so I like grabbed the iPhone, and I remember my memory being just like, I got to try cover flow. I got to try this touchscreen.
Yeah.
Flicking it and all that stuff like that.
And that first iPhone was, like, in terms of just industrial design, was so much better than the one that came after it, right?
Yeah,
so it's like
3G,
actually very impressive.
Well, because they had to make it like cheaper, right? So they kind of got the metal back and stuff like that. And then I also remember my buddy that I was with, like he just couldn't figure out the touchscreen. I was mind blown by that.
Yeah.
But so that was my first experience with the iPhone. But the iPhone that I'm picking as my number one device, and this is no surprise to you, you know how I feel about this. But for me, like, again, in terms of iPhones that I've owned, because I've owned basically the 3G, the 4S, the 6, the 10. To me, it's the 4S. The 4S is like, and to me, equivalently, the 4 would fit in this category. It's just like, I think, in my opinion, it was like an amazing size. It was so fast. It was the design made it look like I remember when the 4 came out, everyone talked about how premium the device looked. It looked like a nice, like Leica camera almost. And I love that the 12 is kind of going back to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the design is so good, it's come back.
Yeah, exactly. It's come back 8 generations later. And it was built like a tank. I remember dropping that thing. I always tell the story about how I was in like a TD Bank, and I dropped it from standing distance down to tile floor, and it survived. Like no cracks whatsoever. And I still love that size, and I love why, like, that's why I love the iPhone 12 mini going back to that size. I haven't liked an iPhone as much as that one, like, since. But that's why I got really excited about the 12. The 12 did look really, really good. But yeah, the 4S is my pick. And there's just like, again, it's one of those devices that I would purposely like leave my house, like hoping to get like an MSN message on it or something like that, because like, oh, I can do this now, right?
Yeah, it was such a big leap from the 3G and 3GS, right? Like, it's just, and again, it's not that the phones that came after, nothing, like, those kept getting better, and it's not like they were bad. But yeah, maybe it was like kind of like, the SNES of like phones, right? Like, such a big leap. And that was, I think with the 3G, they were still trying to figure things out, and, it was kind of slow. It wasn't what I would consider like a good looking or nice to use, like, physically. But then they really kind of figured things out with the 4, and I agree. That's like still probably one of the best phones I guess they've ever made.
Yes. All right. Again, if you guys want to email us at the ETC. I keep screwing this up. podcast.etc@gmail.com. Visit our YouTube channel, and if you're watching this on YouTube, there is an audio version that you can subscribe to on your favorite podcast channel. Yeah. Which brings us to our number one picks of 2020 for top 5 technology items. episode 50 of the ETC podcast.
Yeah.
Need a big drum roll or whatever. All right, Aaron. What? I'm expecting big things here. Big preamble.
I don't know, because
what is your number one device?
Because it's chronological and not by necessarily
Yeah, it's not as
most
impressive.
impact. But I think this is still a good one. But it is the most modern choice, the most recent chronologically in my list. And this one was interesting because compared to the other ones, this was not necessarily it was a formative experience or anything like that. But it's just such a damn good technology and device.
I have a prediction in my head. I have a prediction in my head.
Should we guess like each other's? Like, I don't know. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Well, I have a feeling you're never going to guess mine, but
okay.
yeah. Let's do that. Okay. Let's guess each other's.
But should I give you a hint or?
Right. Cause one
hint is it's something that I got in the last like year or two, like, so fairly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's newer than the RX-7 because if you do chronological or whatever, that's pretty big gap. Okay, so we'll stay on yours, and then when we get to mine, I'll try to get you to guess mine as well.
Okay.
Without many hints, I'm going to guess your Tesla Model 3.
No, but I was thinking about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you give me one more hint, and I'll see if I can guess it?
There is something related to a Tesla in that it is autonomous to some extent. Like, it does its own thing without you having to control it.
Okay. I can't imagine it's the Roomba. It's not the Roomba, right?
It actually is.
It isn't? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So number one, I guess specifically have a Roomba right now, but just a robot vacuum in general, which is I think this is the reason why this is on my list, is because it's one of those things that, I think, like, oh yeah, like this is kind of neat, right? And a lot of people are like, yeah, it's like, you consider getting one. But it's not until you get one that you realize that, like, this, again, it falls in the category of devices that just does what you think it's going to do, right?
Yeah.
Which is, like, again, a lot of times it's like a letdown, right? Especially when, you hear a lot about something and you have all these expectations and then you get it and, like, it's like, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be, right?
Like Nest's automatic temperature schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point. But this is actually as good, if not like better than what I was like kind of expecting. And it's just, I think it's a combination as well with, obviously this year I've been home a lot more than normal, right? And it's just like a quality of life improvement to have around. And then it's also a nice mix of just like, it's cool technology. It's a bit like, it has a little bit of personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like this perfect combination of just like, it's super useful. It makes my life better. It does exactly what I was expecting. And then, it's just kind of interesting, right? Like, it's like we put on a schedule. And so like once a week it starts doing its thing. And that's incredible. It's just like, that's cool. Like, I feel like there's very few things that it makes me feel like I'm in the future because you take so much for granted, but in a weird way that this like simple robot vacuum kind of does make you feel like that. Right. Because we don't have anything else that's really like even all the other home automation stuff doesn't really feel like we're in the future. Right. Like, okay, my lights turn on at a certain time, but like whatever. Right. Yeah. But there's like little robot vacuum going around. And we just found out that they have this companion vacuum that's a mopping vacuum. Okay.
Yeah.
So it will mop your floors. But not only that, it coordinates with the vacuum robot. Oh, so they basically follow each other. Like one robot goes off, and then the other one goes and will do mopping. And I don't know. It's just like it's like that just makes me feel like I'm in the future, right? Yeah. And not in a stupid way. Not in a way that's like, it's like, look what I can do, but it's like completely useless. Like I don't need to do that, right?
Yeah.
This actually does something where it's like, like this is enjoyable. It's a cool little thing, and also like it actually improves my life, right? So So maybe a little bit anticlimactic, but the Roomba, I forget what the model is, but the Roomba vacuum that I have.
Well, I have to say, you kind of brought me back with your description because I think because I was thinking the Model 3, I was like, okay, the Roomba, okay, right? But yeah, then you brought me back. I think that's true. Like, I mean, I've never lived with the Roomba, so I can't say that.
Also similar to the Model 3 because it's internet connected and the software updates. It's gotten better since we first got it, and so
right.
like it's like it had a few like places it got stuck before software update. They have updates now where you can on the newer ones you can tell it to just go clean a specific room.
Yeah.
So it'll be like, hey, I spilled something in the kitchen. It'll just go. And again, like you can do that through, it has voice commands. So again, it's one of those things where I feel it's the only situation where you could use a voice command and it actually feels appropriate. And again, it feels like you're in the future versus every other thing like that is just, I don't know, it's like a novelty. Whereas this is actually, I want to use it. And this is awesome. This robot just appears and cleans up my mess, right? Like that.
Yeah. No, okay. All right. Number 1 pick. Roomba. Although, to be fair, Aaron's are chronological versus best over the other. Okay, so my number 1 pick kind of goes back to talking about the creative stuff that I was doing. It goes back to that idea. It's not necessarily in that category, but I think if it's one thing that I've concluded about myself, and I'm a very introspective, self-interested person. So I've done a lot of soul searching over the last, 38 years or so of my life. And one thing that I've concluded about myself is that I am a person of what a lot of people would think of as like mutually exclusive thoughts, right? So I consider myself an extrovert and an introvert. Like I very much enjoy introverted stuff and I very much enjoy extroverted stuff. I'm very much into arts and I'm very much into science. Like these kind of, I mean, that I also think there's a blurry line, but there are things that people generally tend to one side or the other. And I'm very much like kind of not just kind of halfway in between. I'm kind of intense about both. Right. And so one thing I have to say that, I think it makes sense when you look at it and when you think about it, but like a lot of the devices that I own, I love because they give me a great job and they give me great creativity and I can output a lot of things that I want to do. And one of the things I love doing is creating, right? Like my day-to-day job as a software engineer, we do this podcast. I like to play music. I like to make films. I like to create stuff as much as I can. And I love all the devices that let me do that, right? One of the things I didn't mention again about computers is all of the programming that I can do, and I love that stuff, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so I love all these devices that allow me to do that stuff. But because of that, I think because I'm very intense when it comes to creation and again making these artifacts or whatever, is that I think I also very much am passionate about relaxing and disconnecting and not being actively involved in my devices and stuff like that, right? Like I think people think like they think about me and they're like, "Oh, Casey, you're so much into technology," but I'm the first to like love when I go to a hotel and I don't have Wi-Fi. Like I love that. I love like when I'm forced to disconnect, and I really enjoy it. I've been telling you recently, I've been charging my phone out in the family room, and I don't have my phone in the bedroom, and it's nice to disconnect and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
So the more I thought about this, the more I realized this is what justified my number 1 pick. And it's that I love this device because as technology seems to progress, it seems to lean more towards the productive side. It's like stuff where you're engaged more and you're doing more and you're like these devices want you to be on them all the time. And they want you, and not even just attention, but active attention, where you have to actively participate, right? And this is always one of the problems I've had with smartphones, right? It's like you want to enjoy something on that. You might get an email from work, or you might get a text message from your friend or whatever, and then all of a sudden your mind gets into like productivity mode.
I feel like I know where this is going, but
so this device, in my opinion, in my entire life, has generally stayed towards the relaxing and disconnecting and just enjoying, not necessarily disconnecting, but enjoying and being very passive and just enjoying the device. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do you want me to guess?
Sure.
I want to say television.
Yes, that's exactly 100% it. So
Yeah.
my number one pick, the category is television because, I think the thing with television is that they've tried to add more stuff into it by allowing you to connect your keyboard and all this stuff. And if you even look at the Apple TV remote, it's very minimal, right? And if anything, remotes are getting more minimal. And when you watch a movie, you kind of put it on and you just don't, like, even though they've added stuff where you can bring up the cast and all that stuff, like that, you generally try to lay back. And, the most work that I think that has hit TV, and we talked about this in the past as well, is like on demand. Like the most work that you have to do is choose what you want to watch. And even that annoys me a bit. Like I like cable because it chooses what to watch for me. But I can't think of any other device. Like the iPod was in this category as well. Like the iPod was very much a passive device, right? I mean, yes, you'd create playlists and stuff like that, but you'd play it and you'd listen to it. That's it. And as soon as the iPod became part of the iPhone, you lost that. The iPhone now became your listening device also became all your other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the TV hasn't really successfully done that, and I like that. I like that the TV has stayed a very passive device. And specifically, the TV that I picked was my very first high def TV. This was like a Sony KDL 46W or something like that. I can't remember exactly what
It's really
it is.
impressive. You
It's something like that.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. But it was my first high def TV, and I remember my first high def experience was actually in your basement. Like my first experience with somebody owning a high def TV.
Right. Okay.
You guys had your DLP Samsung.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is so nice. And then my parents got me, it was so nice. Like I was basically moving to Ottawa and they kind of set me up. They bought me all this nice stuff for my apartment. And one of the things they bought me was a 46-inch high def TV. And I remember maybe a PS3 as well, because it was the cheapest Blu-ray player you could buy at the time. And I would buy Planet Earth and all these Blu-rays and all this stuff. And it's not the best TV I've owned. I mean, the best TV I own right now is the one that I own right now. But like, you remember what it's like, the first like foray into high def, like how crazy that was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's so funny how revisiting, because I think that old TV that you're talking about in my parents' basement. I remember a few years after going and watch it, and like it's like, this is terrible. Like, so it's crazy how quickly technology progressed. But then it's all about those were kind of like quantum leaps, right, at the time.
Yeah.
Because prior to that we were looking at for those who do remember the tube, like CRT TVs, right?
Yeah.
Where you could literally see like the dots in the glass, like the grain in the glass.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think that like first, generation shift, and then, things that again today we take for granted, but when high definition media came out, right? I mean, even DVDs, right? Like at one point in time, you watch DVD and you're like, this is amazing, right? The
even that
so
was
good,
amazing.
right?
Yeah. It's so true. I remember my first notice of that was they were playing Bad Boys in a Sony store. And I remember it said like, this preview has been approved for all audiences. And I remember that green just looking so like clear. I was like,
Yeah.
this just looks so clean, right? And that was DVDs. And then the jump to high def was crazy. And don't get me wrong, like high def to 4K and HDR and all this stuff is good, but that jump from standard def to high def is like crazy, right? It was like insane.
Totally.
What a big leap that was.
Yeah.
And again, the big justification goes back to devices these days are just getting more complicated, and again, they're trying to do it with TV. I think they're failing, but again, to my benefit. I think the fact that TV is still, like if you put your phone away and your iPod away, like, I mean, it's even hard these days to watch TV and not glance at your phone. Like that's a very hard thing to do. So when you get into a space where you can actually just decide, I'm just going to watch TV, it's a pretty, like, it's crazy, because TV used to be like TV used to be that thing, right? The kind of the evil thing that rotted your brain and that was like, so bad for you. But I feel like now actually just watching TV is actually kind of a good thing. And so that is my number one.
I mean, this is
HDTV.
This is why, I mean, it's great. Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. Like the reason why I still love cinema. And again, I'd be really sad if it kind of fades away and kind of goes away. And so this year, one thing I am missing is just that there's a certain aspect of, call it whatever you want, like turning your mind off for a little bit, escapism, not just being bombarded with constantly being pulled into like interacting with something, right? It's why I love cinema, right? I think you go to a theater and, there's enough existing social norms and things like that where like you can't even pull out your phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the thing is like, I think, it's great that, there's a push now for maybe movies will just come out right away for streaming. But even if, you have a great home theater setup like and whatnot, it's not even about the like visual, like technical experience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For me, it's just all about the, mindset of going to watch a movie, right? And that just being a very singular experience, right? Like you're not there to be distracted or look at your phone or do anything else. And so, yeah, 100% agree with you. I think that is like still, I have no interest in trying to like spend hours interacting with a smart TV, right? And so I think like I'm on board with that. Yeah.
All right, that is our top 5 list. And you know what's funny? It kind of worked out that this would have been if like kind of would have been a double fat episode. It's about 2 45-minute slots, but we're gonna still release it as one episode.
Yeah,
our single, I guess a double fat single episode.
Yeah.
But just to recap for everybody, Aaron, what were your 5 best technology items?
Yeah. So number 1. So this was chronological. Number 1 was the Lego Space Monorail set. There's a specific name I don't remember. Sorry, that number 5. Number 4 was first computer ever had. It was 286. 3 was a CD burner. 2 was my very first car, 1990, I believe, Mazda RX-7. And number 1 is the Roomba, I think i7. I forget the specific model, but yeah.
All right, my number 5 was the Magellan first GPS I ever owned. I guess my family owned. Number 4 was my iPad Pro. Number 3 was the Super Nintendo. Number 2 was the iPhone 4S, and my number 1 was my first high def TV, which was a Sony KDL 46W series, somewhere around there. This has been really fun. I really want to thank the audience for sticking around with us for 50 episodes. This is probably the strongest the ETC podcast has ever been. So I think we're going to keep going, we're probably going to take a break sometime a break in the season. But we've been very fortunate to have, the 30 or so subscribers on the ETC podcast. And now people growing the audience on YouTube. I really want to thank everybody for that. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com. You can also check out our website, anchor.fm/the-etc-podcast. The ETC podcast is currently hosted on anchor.fm, but distributed to all your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, and more. If you want to tell us what your favorite technology items are, you can also leave a voice message on our website, just like Andrea did, but you only have 1 minute to do that. Aaron, this has been a lot of fun. I love these list episodes.
Awesome.
We should maybe we'll sneak in a Christmas one, gift guide or whatever. Anyways, we definitely want to thank everybody. Do you want to thank everybody? It's a 50th episode extravaganza.
Yeah, I mean, you made it this far. That's thanks for listening. That's a lot of episode, a lot of ETC.
Yes, definitely count the number of hours that you spent listening to Casey Lee and Aaron Said Anchor. All right, that is it for this episode 50 extravaganza, the top 5 technology items that we have ever owned for 2020. It is a wonderful Wednesday night, November 4th, 2020. We still don't know the U.S. election results. Hopefully those will come pouring in the next couple of days. And you can be sure that we will have zero information on it because we have zero information on anything that we report on. All right, that is it for episode 50, 25 times 2 or 62 minus 12. We will see you guys in the next episode.
Robot vacuum says future.